Geeking Out! Hey, welcome to another installment of Catching Up. I'm Sam.
I'm Chris.
And this week we've got an interview with W. Maxwell Prince. He's here to
great
talk
name.
It is, yeah. Kingly, regal, in fact.
Even, yeah.
But he's here to promote his Image Comics book, 1 Week in the Library. And we also talk about his IDW book, The Electric Sublime. We talk about his first IDW book, Judas. And you should definitely check all that stuff out. But without much further ado, let's let him talk about it. Joining us in the studio this week, we've got W. Maxwell Prince. His book, 1 Week in the Library with John Moore on art, comes out in comic book shops everywhere and on Comixology on December 7th and in regular bookstores everywhere on December 13th through Image Comics. Will, thanks for coming on the show.
Thanks for having me.
So this book really explores and kind of deconstructs just the sheer Gesundheit power of words themselves. So how did you kind of go about tackling such a abstract topic?
Yeah, well, it's actually kind of weird. John and I did an OGN on IDW that came out last year called Judas: The Last Days. And it was this weird, I can't even really explain it. It was basically the first comic I had ever made about Judas the Apostle being immortal. And even though it came out last year, we had been working on it for like 6 years, maybe. I could only really produce the book as fast as I could pay John for it, which was not very fast. So we've basically been working together for a long time, and then we finally wrapped that project up. And I was kind of worried after we were done that all those kind of newfound comics writing muscles that I had hoped that I had acquired would kind of atrophy and go away if I didn't continue to make comics. So I asked John if he wanted to work on kind of a low stakes short story that I had kind of rattling around in my head, which was Thursday, which is the first story in the book. And I had been reading a lot of Jorge Luis Borges, so I kind of wanted to do something in a big infinite library. And we finished Thursday in a couple weeks, and I kind of took a step back from it, and I was like, oh, that's pretty good. What about Friday? And then so at that point, I kind of started to realize that the form of the short story, the structure of a short story, and the ways that a kind of little project about a library could kind of cover one of my main interests, which is the power of a word or many words or book or piece of art. So yeah, it's kind of made Thursday first, and then realized that there was a lot of potential to talk about stuff that's important to me, through 6 more stories after that.
I do have to ask, because you've got is it the Electric Sublime with IDW as well coming out?
That is correct, yeah. Issue 1 came out either a week or 2 ago, and issue 2's out in a couple weeks.
Right, so that book kind of deconstructs art in a way, especially, there's quite a bit of Baroque influence and that sort of thing. What is it about deconstructing, say, literature, or even just the written form in general? Because you really, in 1 Week in the Library, you tackle everything. There's like a scientific section, there's a relatively silent section, there's a prose section, and then with, of course, Electric Sublime, you're kind of deconstructing art as well. What is it about these, just these cornerstones of, I guess, fine arts? Is theater next on the chopping block?
Yeah, I mean, one would think so, right? Yeah, I think I just... I find, besides Monday Night Football, the sort of greatest solace in the fine arts. They, like for so many people, have a kind of transformative power on my moods. There were, if I'm not feeling well, they're what I turn to kind of turn things around, or when I'm feeling kind of dry and need a kind of spark of inspiration, they're what I turn to kind of get me going. So I think they're just, I'm so wrapped up in them that it's just kind of come naturally to sort of really just talk about stuff that I love in the form of comics.
What was it about? What do you think about? Was it about the comic medium that you could kind of explore the entire realm of literature, art, versus say like prose or anything else?
Yeah, it's a good question. There's this book. I was really lucky in college. This is like 10 years ago, 10 or 11 years ago now. I took a bunch of classes with a woman named Hilary Shute, who was pretty much the preeminent comics scholar. She went on to become a Harvard fellow and then co-wrote a book with Art Spiegelman. But she gave us this book called, I think the guy's name is Mark Madden, called 99 Ways to Tell a Story. And it's the same. It's a one-page story told 99 times in comic form, but told in completely different ways. So some of them are drawn the same, but just sort of told from different vantages, different kind of angles in the house, which change the context of the story. Some are told in completely different sort of modes, different drawing styles. And I kind of always cite that book as something that is a pretty loud testament to the kind of inherent power of like a sequential story to be able to do things that perhaps you can't do in other mediums. I mean, there's lots of freedom in other mediums to experiment and to tell really complicated stories, but for me at least, comics has always sort of stood out as perhaps having more possibilities than others.
Now, there is something about, I mean, you mentioned earlier that fine arts have given you kind of an outlet and an escape. But having said that, when following, say, Alan in 1 week at the library, following, Arthur in Electric Sublime, I feel like the further they get into these like wild, fantastical worlds, there's also an isolating quality to them as well.
Yeah, and I think that's pretty intentional. And that kind of speaks to the other side of the great power of art, is that it can be really frustrating too, especially if you're trying to create it. The act of writing itself is a really lonely and isolated experience. And then there's, I don't know, it's especially when I read a good book, I start to feel this really strange and complicated mix of emotions where I'm in some sense escaping, but then if the writing is really good and the author's doing some sort of important work, then I'm also kind of simultaneously escaping, but then like having to look at myself harder and kind of try to understand myself better. So in one way it becomes this sort of fantasy, and in another way it becomes almost like a self-assessment because of the things that you're sort of starting to understand through the line-to-line process of reading. So yeah, I think that's I hope that comes out to people, that for all of the kind of escape and entry into the other, you're also sort of at the same time looking straight into a mirror and having to kind of place yourself in the world through either literature or story or ideas or whatever.
How important was it for you to, because both works, because I do feel like they're companion pieces in a way. I haven't read Judas. Is Judas kind of a deconstruction and re-examination of Iscariot?
It is, and it's got a number of the apostles in it, and I think it's got some pretty similar themes. I mean, especially when you're looking at something like the Bible or the New Testament. I mean, that's all about the power of the Word made flesh. So that kind of through line, that running theme that I seem to have of trying to analyze the power of a word or a single thought, kind of starts there, actually. But also in some places, I started making that thing when I was like 23, so it definitely reads in some spots like a 23-year-old trying to write his first comic book. I think the end chapters are pretty good, but that's just me. But
you can kind of trace your progression as a writer.
Yeah, exactly. That's well put. Yeah, I think the themes are sort of all similar throughout all my works, but it's kind of evolving, and I'm really lucky that the Electric Sublime on IDW and One Week in the Library on Image are kind of coming out around the same time. I think possibly issue 3 of the Electric Sublime comes out the same day as One Week in the Library, because they are sort of different explorations of the same idea, which is the power of art, really.
Why did you want to make One Week in the Library a kind of more of a graphic novella as opposed to, say, issue by issue, like each issue would be a day?
A lot of that came just for really kind of boring reasons, like page count. I made the first short story with John Thursday, and it was 8 pages. And that kind of made me realize that it wasn't going to be a series by any stretch. But then I also realized that that would allow me to make chapters of differing lengths. Some of the stories are 8 pages, some are 20 pages, some are 16 pages. I think the longest one is like a full 22, like a regular issue of comics. But then I kind of wondered, when I was kind of working through that, I had already kind of signed a contract for the Electric Sublime and realized that I had kind of signed myself up for, the business of serial comic storytelling, month to month, where, if you're doing good work, there are kind of conventions that you sort of have to follow in order to get people to stay interested. So those include, the last page being a splash page that kind of has some sort of cliffhanger that brings you back next month. Mm-hmm. Little reveals on the page turn, if you're kind of following a certain philosophy of comics writing, where every time a reader turns a page, they should kind of see something new or that they didn't expect. And then I realized that the short story format allowed me to kind of be free from those constraints. You didn't have to write for the page turn. You didn't have to make something sensational or mysterious happen on the last page of each chapter. You could kind of work at whatever length and pace you wanted, and just sort of kind of create toward a goal of having something cohesive, but something that doesn't have to, be sort of the same piece to piece, which then, of course, kind of evolved into, well, what if I also told these stories in different ways? What if I used infographics, and what if I used prose, and what if I stripped out the text in one chapter, and what if I kind of played around with color and perspective? So, and then of course, I don't know if it's spoiling anything, but in the last chapter, I was also like, well, what if I just kind of wrote myself into the book too? So yeah, it was just the forum started to suggest a kind of freedom, and it ended up being pretty fun to kind of play around like that.
And there's a moment, without going into too much detail and giving you mentioned that you do write yourself into the last day. There's a moment where I guess yourself is like, writing should be fun. And it's like, oh, yeah, there's so many comics these days, and they're great books. And there's so many books too, and movies, and I guess really just about anything in like popular medium. But I feel like we're at a point where everyone's kind of like embracing the misery, and it's like, but you can have fun too, And I really like that.
Yeah, I agree. And I am guilty of, as you put it, embracing the misery. I get really down on myself about certain aspects of my writing and certain limitations that I have as a creator. Writing can be, for anyone that's tried it or is doing it, can be really painful when you're trying to, make something perfect. And then you have, especially if you have like a fidelity to perfectionism, anything you make isn't going to be what it looked like in your head. It's not going to be as, amazing as you thought it was when you're like, oh yes, this is this is it. This is my new idea. You're making compromises constantly, but at a certain point, you should also kind of embrace that and realize that, it's one of the greatest freedoms in the world to just kind of pull stuff from whole cloth and make worlds and make people and put words in their mouths. So it was kind of me. I kind of considered it like self-therapy on the page, like reminding myself, like, oh, this should be a good time, and you're lucky to be able to do it, and have especially in this case a publisher like Image Comics agree to try to get other people to read it.
And I gotta say, Will, you mentioned this in in again, it's really weird because your character yourself mentions this. I do want you to know that you do, between both books, write very smart, but at the same time very accessible. In fact, I think there's a sequence, and I kind of hinted at it earlier in the book, where it's kind of like this, like the science of literature, where you've got the charts and everything. I was like, this is like the coolest thing, like where you just kind of like break it down. And I just hope that on some level, you do write smart, and it is, again, accessible at the same time.
Well, thank you. Yeah, I think my big problem was, these being my kind of second and third major projects, is that I came out of Judas, which, if you guys ever choose to read it, it can read like someone who's got an axe to grind and has a chip on their shoulder, trying to kind of prove to the world like what a bright guy he is. And I think Judas in a lot of places kind of suffers from that. It loses that accessibility, and I wanted to make sure. I always want to make sure going forward that I kind of embrace that, because that's also another thing that's really beautiful about comics, is that it could be really sophisticated and literary, but also have this kind of pop culture or everyman kind of bent to it because of its long history and the kind of ways that it moves. It's just it's important to kind of, I think, embrace both of those sides and find that balance of smart but fun.
One of the things we were talking about off mic before we had you on, the word we kept using was how this book's really ambitious, like with having you, writing yourself into the book and the prose and the charts and different ways of looking at things. Where does that come from? Is that something that, an artist or a writer or a band or something that really inspired you to kind of push the envelope in storytelling?
Yeah, I mean, that's a really good question. Not obviously, but a lot of the, my favorite artists, whether they're musicians or writers, have sort of taken big chances over the course of their careers. And I think I've tried to sort of follow suit there. I think also a part of it just comes from me not like the kind of serial plotting storytelling that is sort of required to have like a kind of flourishing career in modern comics doesn't come naturally to me. The Electric Sublime, which I think stands up pretty well, was pretty much the hardest thing I've ever had to write, because you have to write like a story that makes sense and has a plot and has people going from point A to point B for a reason. And so I don't know. I think the ambition comes from both desire to be as brave as some of my favorite artists and writers and painters and thinkers, but it also comes from just sort of a lack of natural ability to just be sort of linear, the way that I think I would, and the way that I think a lot of people think is a little bit more haphazard than like a linear story. I mean, we're always kind of, especially with our phones and all the crap that we get fed throughout the day, you're kind of bouncing around from idea to idea constantly, and there's never a kind of neat unfolding of ideas. And so I think the book, just if it seems ambitious, just kind of reflects that. And I'm happy that it at least comes off as ambitious.
Well, and you had mentioned, like, you were trying to, all these great works of art, all these great writers as well. Between both, you wear your influences pretty clearly on your sleeves, but you're not beholden to them. Was that something that was very important to you jumping in?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, again, I think I was trying to address certain problems that I had with earlier versions of my writing, where you want to make the right references and you want to kind of show like where you're coming from, but then at a certain point you're kind of just needlessly like shoving it down the reader's throat. And I wanted to make it clear that I'm, sort of charmed and moved by types of work and certain works, but that whatever I'm doing is its own thing, and it's just the result of loving other things. So yeah, it was important to me to kind of a little bit more subtly maybe be referential, and kind of all that winking that's done across pages.
Now, I know this can be like picking one of your own kids, but do you have a particular favorite or something that was maybe just a joy to write or something that you connected with more than you thought you would within 1 week at the library, within the 7 vignettes?
I'm really jazzed by Sunday, the one that you had mentioned with the infographics and the data and the charts. I make charts as my day job for a company called Pop Chart Lab. We make infographics of like everything. And so it was really fun to take what I do every day and try to apply it to, this medium that I've been exposed to since I was like 4 years old, and try to somehow shoehorn, kind of a data visualization into a comic book. I don't know. I'm not sure that I read enough to know that it's never been done, but I think it's at least very infrequently been done. So I'm really happy about Sunday. And then I think just Tuesday came together really nicely, especially collaborating with John. He's just kind of a tremendous talent, and we kind of understand each other very well in terms of two collaborators. So the whole kind of shifting between color and black and white in that chapter, and shifting between the mundane and the fantastic, I think that he really kind of knocked that out of the park. So I like that chapter too.
I do feel like Tuesday is almost like a mission statement, or at least for the whole book, really, with Alan kind of escaping the mundane, the humdrum, by simply putting on his glasses like they live.
Yeah, pretty much. Except without all the weird messages written on everything.
Yeah. No bubble gum either.
Yeah, no Roddy Piper.
Yeah. I remember, I think it was a couple of years ago. I was entering a Starbucks, and they always have like their like seasonal promotions where they have all this writing on the doors and on the windows and stuff. And it must have been like a fall one. Then they were promoting the pumpkin spice latte, and the door said, "Take comfort in rituals." And I kind of felt like I was wearing the They Live glasses when I saw that. I was like, "This is it. Like, these are the aliens, like telling me
and then
that I need to drink a pumpkin spice latte."
Yeah.
And then you went in and got one.
I absolutely.
Yeah. And the barista was like, Roddy Piper.
Yeah. I was also wearing a kilt. So.
Oh yeah, of course. And then also, Will, forgive me. Which day was the one with the fly?
Oh, the Charlotte's Web.
The Charlotte's Web. I couldn't remember.
Yeah. So that's a Monday.
Monday. That was my favorite one because I love. I guess you call it like silent storytelling, which is funny because we're talking to the writer. But like, how did that whole issue come about, or that section come about? Because again, it's very much detailed by the very storytelling by visuals. But of course, there obviously was a story there. How did that kind of come about with you and the artist?
Yeah, that started off like I had like a full idea, a full story. It was intended to be silent for the kind of first post-fly character you see, which is a sort of version of the ugly duckling.
Mm-hmm.
And I kind of had like 18 or so pages written about the ugly duckling, and then kind of lost interest in that, and tried to think about where the ugly duckling might end up that would be interesting. And so I don't really know when it occurred to me, but I just kind of put that thing. It was actually the image of the spider hauling up the bird that it had caught. I thought that was kind of a beautiful image, and I wanted to see John draw it. So I kind of forced myself to push the ugly duckling or the bird or whatever toward a spider. And then I kind of asked myself at one point, well, what if this was like a spider that people kind of know already? And the only one that could really come to me was the one from Charlotte's Web, was Charlotte. And so then, of course, the pig had to make an appearance. And then I think just by that point, I was like, oh, well, I'm really shifting a lot. Like, what if I continued to shift more and more? So then, of course, again, I don't know if it really spoils it for anyone. I don't think it will. But the pig from Charlotte's Web actually just becomes Babe from Babe.
Yeah.
And, like, James Cromwell kind of walks out.
Definitely.
But then instead of him having a nice relationship with his pig, he's actually using the pig for something else. So it just kept sort of transforming from one thing into another. And then as another one of those things where you take a step back and you're like, oh, I'm pretty happy with the way that came out, even though it took, a lot of rewriting and a lot of abandoned scripts to get there.
That felt very, and it's funny I say this because there's another like moment where I feel that too, where that section in particular felt very Grant Morrison to me, like seeing the different things kind of come to, and like you said it as well, like you write yourself in the book, and if this is too much, we can cut it out, but the Grant Morrison thing reading that I was like, oh fuck yes, because like Animal Man is my favorite comic book run of all time, and so seeing yourself write yourself into the story, that had to be fun.
Oh, absolutely. And then, but and as I kind of talk about in the book, it was also just kind of nerve-wracking because
sure.
you're like, well, I don't want to seem like I'm just copying something that someone else has done, and done to great effect too, right? I mean, it's one of the best kind of ends of a run ever.
Sure.
So I was kind of worried. I was like, well, I don't want people to think I'm just kind of phoning it in. So I wanted to kind of acknowledge the fact.
Well, I thought that was really clever.
Yeah, that I was nervous, and that not just nervous about him, but the fact that other people have done it, and that it's not some new novel idea, but it's something that I was kind of choosing to do anyway, knowing that it's been done before.
It was really cool, and I have to say, like, now that I think about it, you never see Charlotte in Charlotte's Web eat, but now you do.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah,
I had to do a double take. I was like, oh damn.
I'm retconning Charlotte's Web.
Yeah, that's right.
My claim to fame.
And Babe.
Yeah, and Babe.
That'll do, pig.
That'll do, pig.
That's right.
Yeah.
So I something else I feel almost obligated to ask. It's Halloween when we're recording this. Do you you don't really, now that I'm thinking about it, there isn't a lot of necessarily straight up horror, though you could there is a ghost story of sorts in 1 week at the library. Do you have a favorite scary film or horror film?
I don't watch a lot of horror because I hate being scared. When I was a kid, I had this babysitter. I must have been like 6 or 7 years old, who was a kind of troubled dude. He made me watch the Stephen King's It at a very young age, which didn't do wonders for me and my relationship with clowns. But I just realized that I hate being terrified. I hate being shocked. And so I stayed pretty far away from horror films. By the way, that same babysitter used to, he would fake being passed out on the floor and make me call 911. Oh, and then would grab the phone from me and be like, "No, it's fine."
What a dick.
he eventually got fired. He actually started a giant forest fire in my backyard, and that was the end of him.
Oh man!
But that's neither here nor there. But yeah, so I don't watch a ton of horror. I'm trying to think what the last kind of scary movie that I watched was. I mean, maybe like classics like that are a little bit sort of on the verge of sci-fi and horror, so like Invasion of the Body Snatchers and stuff like that.
Right, The Thing.
Yeah, and what was that? That movie with the recent movie with the girl robot.
Ex Machina.
Ex Machina, which was a sci-fi film, but I thought had elements of horror to it.
Yeah, absolutely.
Especially with Oscar Isaac's character, he was certainly a horrific figure, not really knowing what he was going to do, what the robot was going to do. So I would cite that as maybe the most recent kind of actual terror that I felt.
Yeah, it's funny. Yeah, horror is one of those genres where you can kind of really stretch it, to...
Like, I consider Gone Girl a horror.
Yeah, Gone Girl is definitely a horror movie.
Right.
Because I remember I saw that. I like, this isn't sad, me. I like to go to see movies by myself. And
that's great.
And I went there, and there was all these couples going to see it. And I was like, oh, shit.
Because it has girl in the title.
Yeah, they were like, oh, Ben Affleck, and it's the Gone Girl. And I swear to God, as I was leaving the theater, people were just breaking up left and right. Because, the guys were taking Ben Affleck's side, and the girls were taking the girls' side. And they're like, just so. But, I mean, violence aside in that movie, these two people are stuck in this, like, cycle, this awful life for the rest of the, because of, jealousy and rage and all this stuff. So yeah, that's definitely a horror movie. One of the better ones I think in recent years.
Yeah. To kind of echo your It story, I remember we live right outside D.C. and just on the other side of the Potomac, and the Exorcist steps are in Georgetown. So when I was a boy, my father took me to see the Exorcist steps, and then we watched The Exorcist.
Oof.
And maybe that wasn't the smartest bit of parenting he's ever done. Maybe.
Yeah, I mean, that's it. And you kind of, so my wife is due to have our first child in like 6 or 7 weeks.
Congrats.
Congrats.
Oh, thank you.
Right around the time that 1 week at the library comes out.
It is going to be a busy fall. Yes. Possibly on the same day. Who knows? But yeah, you realize that like this, when you expose a child to this stuff, it stays with them for a long time. Someone who's 31 now, and all the kind of weird visceral terror that I still experience, when I see a weird clown or certain weird images that remind me of movies, it's like that stuff is semi-permanent. You got to be careful.
The memories gel rather quickly, especially the more traumatic ones.
Well, yeah, we were talking about Thriller. Remember how like you watch that? Because we're we're 30, we're in our 30s. Sam and I are 30, and you watch. I think if a kid watched that now, they think it was like the goofiest thing in the world. Yeah. But there are so many. Yeah, there's so many moments in that where I see it now where it takes me back to seeing that for the first time on TV and like changing the channel immediately.
The greatest musician of our generation becomes the monster twice. If you think about it.
And Vincent Price.
Yeah, he's like a corpse and a werewolf. There's also like a kind of confused narrative there. But
yeah. Well, it was a dream within a movie within a dream or something to that effect.
Yeah.
I would agree that the first instance of the zombies in Thriller is terrifying. Just 'cause it's before they're dancing, so they're actually just shambling along, and with the direction and the mood and stuff, it's actually it very quickly turns into something obviously that isn't like a horror movie, but that's some pretty good horror fodder right there.
Well, yeah, that's what you get when you hire John Landis to direct the music video.
That's right. Back in the days when big players would spend their time with musicians, spend their free time with musicians.
Was it Scorsese that did Captain EO? Or Coppola?
Coppola. Scorsese did Bad.
Right. Yeah. Man, we're gonna have to watch Thriller after we're done with this.
I got it on the Laserdisc.
So, Will, something we ask everybody that comes on the show: what are you currently geeking out over?
What am I currently geeking out over? Well, I am surrounded. It was my wife's baby shower yesterday, so I'm surrounded by a bunch of baby toys, and some of them seem more for me than they do for the kid. So there's that. I was lucky enough to get an advance copy of the new George Saunders book. George Saunders being, one of the best modern short story writers, he kind of attempted his first novel ever. And I just read it in 2 days. It was just so good. It's called Lincoln in the Bardo. Really weird book, really sort of true to Saunders, but also really beautiful and moving in the ways that he can be. So that's still kind of hanging with me. And I don't read a ton of like Big Two comics that currently come out. I was a pre-New 52 guy, DC kid growing up, and then couldn't really get into too much of the stuff that went on after things started to change so much. So then I started to read a little bit of Marvel, and Tom King's Vision. I'm still 2 issues behind, but that book's just so good. I'm so happy that I decided to download #1 because it's some of the best stuff I've read in a long time.
Yeah, I still haven't read the last issue, but I mean, it, at the time of its publication was my favorite. I guess still is because I haven't read the last issue. My favorite.
Holding on.
Yeah, I don't want it to end. It's like this kind of like superhero Ray Bradbury. It's quite good.
Yeah, exactly. And it's I talk about this with my friend a lot. My friend Frank, who's actually also Frank Barbieri, he writes Violent Love on Image and did Howling Commandos on Marvel.
We had Frank on 2 weeks ago.
Oh, yeah. So Frank and I actually lived together in college for a little bit. We've known each other for a long time.
Yeah.
And completely separately decided to try to pursue careers in comics. And we're both lucky enough to kind of make it there. But Frank and I talked about how interesting it is that, in this modern landscape, you would expect Vision to have to kind of adhere to like the strictures of Disney and the movies, because he is a major character in these movies, that they would have to kind of just churn out this sort of crap that ties in with the movies and make it really flashy and spectacle heavy. But instead they just kind of greenlit this quiet, beautiful story instead. And, I'm not sure sales reflect how good it is, but I think obviously critically and in terms of diehard comic readers, it's just it's really different, which is I think why it succeeds ultimately.
Yeah, and I don't think sales were a factor. Tom ended up going DC exclusive in the middle of the run.
That's right.
Yeah.
So it's interesting that they didn't have to make basically Paul Bettany as Image fighting a bunch of different Ultrons. They greenlit a Vision in the Suburbs book during a time of movie tie-ins. So I thought that was always an interesting choice, and I would love to know the kind of conversations that were had, upon reading that pitch and upon getting it approved by whoever has to approve it.
Yeah. I guess next time we talk to Tom, he's a DC native, but.
I've met him quite a few times now. He's also a tremendously nice dude.
The DC stuff's kind of cool. I know you were saying the New 52, kind of wasn't your thing, but the DC Rebirth stuff they're doing right now is really cool. It's kind of, I don't want to say like a course correct, but would you say it's a course correct?
I would say it's a course
correction.
They all but said it's a course correction.
Yeah.
In like the press statement.
But I mean, there's they bring back, I guess, spoilers for New 52, but not really. They bring back pre-New 52 Superman, and the way
right.
I'm a big Superman nerd, so the stuff that they're doing with Superman and Lois and his son John, and bringing back Krypto, like it's really just some really some of the best Superman stuff I've read in a long time. Action Comics and Superman, because I was one of those guys that was like, why does Superman need a kid? It makes no sense. But then just reading it in the right kind of context and sense, it's a really beautiful thing, seeing Superman as a father. It's really, really done really well right now. So I'm really excited about that stuff.
Yeah, I'll have to check it out. I think I was a little stubborn, once they started to make the changeover. It's just because all of my love for DC was based on the fact that there was this rich, kind of 50-year history.
Definitely.
Where everything connected to everything else. So then to kind of have that blank slate was, crazy and I'm sure really exciting. But like I'm sure so many readers, I felt like I was losing so much that was important to me.
Yeah, I mean, I think if you get the chance, you should check out. Was it just Rebirth #1? They just had like that one Jeff Johns kind of mega artist thing that really focuses around the Flash. That kind of screams pre-New 52 love. You should check that book out. It's really well done.
That's like it's like a huge special, right? It inaugurates the whole thing.
Yeah, it kind of sets everything up, and then kind of really continues with the Flash, but really kind of touches on most of the superheroes. Not really Superman too much because he had his own kind of thing with the New 52 that was kind of ending and restarting. I guess was it the Lois and Clark stuff that they kind of did, the black suit bearded Superman, kind of stepping into the basically New 52 type universe. But yeah, I've definitely been kind of really excited with what DC's doing, because I think they're definitely kind of getting back to what was, from before 3 or 4 years ago.
Well, now I'm gonna have to go check that out.
Yeah. Is there anything outside of the print world or baby toy world that you may like? Video games, movies, music?
Let's see. I've never really done video games. Music wise, Connor Oberst just came out with a new album, super stripped down thing called Ruminations, which is pretty beautiful. One of my favorite bands, Thrice, that came out with a new album much earlier in the year, but I still kind of listen to it once or twice a week. Trying to think what else. TV wise, my wife and I are almost done watching The Americans, and I think that's some of the best TV storytelling I've seen in a long time. It's just the stakes are so high so quickly, and for some reason you find yourself caring about the characters within one episode, which doesn't always happen. You kind of need some time to warm up to these new personalities sometimes, but I thought that was pretty fantastic.
And that's a show that I can never tell where it's necessarily going to go. With some moments in, say, like Game of Thrones or whatever, I'm like, well, this is going to probably happen. Or like Luke Cage, I was like, that's probably going to happen. But watching The Americans is always a roller coaster ride, like emotionally. Yeah, and I have yet to watch the last 3 episodes of Luke Cage. I kind of lost interest a little bit. I loved it for the sheer fact that it was clearly trying to do something different, which I think earns it a sort of ton of respect and credit, at least on my part. But once Cottonmouth was sort of off screen, I started to be a lot less interested. I thought he was just so compelling. Yeah, the guy that plays Diamondback, I mean, he's a good antagonist, but he also chews the scenery like some shit. Like, yeah. He really goes for it. And they kind of just like replaced Cottonmouth with him. Like it became, one sort of mob boss to another. And then the second mob boss just happens to have this weird history that they don't really talk about until like 10 episodes in with Luke Cage. Yeah. All of those Netflix shows I think are really good, but suffer from a kind of spinning of the wheels because they have to do 13 episodes. I feel like if these were all like 9 episode seasons, that they would be just kind of super strong and punchy. Yeah, The Defenders is only supposed to be 8 episodes. Oh, is that right?
And that's going to be the one most packed, full of people.
Basically, they meet. They're like, we need to do this shit. Yeah. And they're probably like, apparently Sigourney Weaver's the bad guy.
Yeah. So. Wow. We've each had a season. Let's do this.
Yeah. Daredevil's had 2.
Yeah. Yeah. I'm really looking forward to the Iron Fist stuff to see what they do with that.
Hopefully the fighting's better than it is in Cage.
Well, yeah, I think it will be.
But yeah, so Will, I mean, now that you're in the process of doing art, you've done literature. So can we expect a deconstruction of music, a deconstruction of theater?
Well, definitely, if IDW allows me to make more of the Electric Sublime, I would like to do a whole little arc on music. But yeah, I'm hopefully I continue to try to take things apart and put them back together, whatever the next thing is.
Sure. And is there anything you want to plug before we sign off?
Just 1 Week in the Library comes out December 7th in comic shops, December 13th in bookstores, and The Electric Sublime is out now, issue 1. It's a currently being called a 4-issue miniseries, but that's kind of dependent on sales and response and all this sort of stuff. So hopefully people come out and we can make more of that too.
Oh, and there you have it. Well, Will, thanks for coming on the show.
Hey, thanks for having me.
What a small world, man, that we would have Frank Barbieri on the show to talk about Violent Love, and 2 weeks later we would have his old roommate, Will Maxwell Prince. And I was establishing these interviews completely separate of them. Yeah. It wasn't like Frank was like, hey, these guys are all right.
Nice.
Hopefully he said these guys are all right.
Maybe.
But,
These guys ain't shit.
Yeah. As far as I know, we haven't had any. Actually, we get pretty good feedback on our interview post-interview scores. But
4.7 stars.
Sure, yeah. Not quite. We're just missing that 5th Michelin star.
Yeah.
But no, again, it was a great read, fantastic read. That was one of those books where Jake and I were just like, because we read a lot of books for the show, if you haven't noticed, and we just kind of like, we're like, 1 Week in the Library. That was really,
like I said, ambitious
and just good.
Good, yeah.
For a graphic novella, it doesn't feel overlong. It doesn't, it moves at a decent clip. I think the 7-day structure works out quite well for it.
And it kind of, like, each one of those days has something, like I kind of mentioned in the interview, it focuses on two of my favorite things in comics, kind of like the silent issue, for lack of a better phrase, and, that kind of fourth wall break. And it does it really well,
Yes, I think it does. Now, you guys do anything cool for Halloween?
No, but I saw 2 movies, and one of them was the new Jack Reacher, and it was terrible.
Isn't the subtitle "Never Go Back"?
Never go back.
They should have not gone back to the sequel.
No. Well, here's the thing,
and you never will again.
It's based on it's based on a book. It's not just kind of they just rushed it out there. But so I don't know how different it is. But the best way I could say, like I loved the first Jack Reacher. It was super fun, unabashed ass kicker. Just very kind of like 80s action star, super badass stuff. And it's like this kind of like unhinged feral pit bull thing. And this movie is like a neutered poodle, unfortunately. And because it takes all the bite away from Jack Reacher. There's one moment in this. Okay, first of all, you know how the trailer starts with, like, in the diner? If you see it, he's like, a couple things are going to happen, which is such a Jack Reacher thing. First, the phone's going to ring. Then I'm going to scratch my right testicle. Then, and so...
word for word.
Yeah, that's how the movie starts. So you don't even see him, like, beat the guys up. But also, there's one thing that they did do in the movie, which I was like kind of glad they showed how it worked. Because in the trailer, he like punches the glass. He's like, I don't like being followed. And I was like, no, like I could buy Jack Reacher doing a lot of things, like just punching, open a window with his bare hand. He takes a salt shaker, like one of those bullet head salt shakers, and he has it in his hand, and he like. That's how he punches the thing open. So I was like, at least it's got that. But Kobe Smulders is good. Everyone's favorite Aunt Robin from How I Met Your Mother, and Agent Hill from Schmarvel, and I don't know. There's a part where he like breaks the guy's windpipe, and he's like, "Look at me," and makes the guy like stare at him while he kills him, which is cool. But I don't know. It became more of a Tom Cruise movie, which isn't a bad thing because I love Tom Cruise, but it should have been a Jack Reacher movie. So get that out of the way. Boom, done. I saw The Accountant though, and I really liked The Accountant. It might have been a little bit tried to be too clever and too many twists and turns for its own good, because the trailer covers like a very small portion of what that movie actually is. Ben Affleck picks up for the lack of brutalness in Jack Reacher by being a total fucking beast in The Accountant. One of my favorite endings that I've seen in a movie all year is in The Accountant. Chris will be happy to know Anna Kendrick's very, very charming, very wonderful in it.
I hear she's not in a whole lot of it.
She's not.
Yeah.
She's not in a whole lot. So don't, if you're going to see like a lot of Anna Kendrick, it's not going to happen, but she's good in the scene she's with.
But you do get to see Ben Affleck blow his fingertips.
He does a couple times. He does.
Good.
But again, there's a couple nice little twists in there. Maybe I'm just a dumb moviegoer. I don't know. But I didn't see some of them coming. There's one big twist that it helps, it kind of unravels with you, so it's not like a big shock all of a sudden, but you kind of figure out the twist with one of the characters as they're figuring it out, and you're like, clever girl. And it's actually I liked it a lot. I thought it was a really well done movie. It's definitely one I'm gonna, if we're going by Sam and our kind of like, would you buy it, I would definitely buy The Accountant. Definitely on my list this year, although still nothing nothing comes close to Sing Street. Like nothing comes even close to Sing Street. But
did you say that nothing?
I almost thought about it, but but yeah, The Accountant's pretty good though. I enjoyed it. You know, it was I told Sam I was like, it's hopefully going to be a palate cleanser after Jack Reacher 2, and it was. It did its job. So and you know, we got a couple movies coming up that that I'm excited about. I know I'm excited about Hacksaw Ridge, but of course Doctor Strange as well.
Yeah, like I enjoyed Sully for what it was, but I haven't truly.
I forgot we saw Sully.
I haven't truly like enjoyed like a fucking movie in the theater since like Hell or High Water. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean that was the same for me, and we were talking about that earlier.
Hell or High Water still at University Mall, so you could still see it in a theater again.
Oh,
sweet.
That's right.
But yeah. Like I said, I definitely want to check The Accountant out again when it comes out on the Vudu. Free State of Jones is on Vudu.
Is it a part of their free movies plan?
No, they had some pretty solid movies on there. You know, it's a pretty interesting thing they're doing.
Yeah.
I did finally pick up Civil War and through the Disney thing, the Blu-ray, you know, the ultimate, you know, everything in one
Disney
pack.
Movie Club.
Yeah, but it's just like, you know, Blu-ray, 3D Blu-ray, digital, every behind the scenes.
I just got it digitally.
Yeah.
I ended up just getting it digitally.
I was like, you know, it's nice. I like to have at least my 3 favorite Marvel movies. So
true.
I got them.
You do anything this past Halloween week, Chris?
It's not quite Halloween related, but I did see Keeping Up with the Joneses, and that was a fun romp. It was a silly movie. Yeah. I went into it not expecting a whole lot because I'm not crazy about Zach Galifianakis. I don't know what it is about him. Like I thought he was great in Hangover, and that's like the only movie that he's been in that I've enjoyed his performance in. But I really enjoyed Keeping Up with the Joneses. I think partially because John Hamm and Gal Gadot do such an amazing job in it. Like they do a really good job of playing the like kind of the straight man. You know what I'm saying? Like 90%. Like they still have their goofy times, but like they're the serious ones, and then Zach Galifianakis and Isla Fisher definitely the silly ones. But like it ended up being a lot funnier and just more fun than I was expecting. Based on the trailers, I was like, whatever. I just need to kill some time after my shift is over, and I don't feel like going straight home. And then, like, I actually found myself laughing, you know, in the audience. You know, I would not call it something that you have to run out and see in the theaters, but if it travels over your path, don't poo-poo it. You know, check it out if you feel like a laugh, which is fun.
Are you having a laugh?
I did get to debut my Halloween costume outside of the the New York Comic-Con, which was my Wreck-It Ralph costume, and it's gotten quite a bit of positive feedback, including two winning costume award thingies. Yeah, people love it.
I've seen it in person. Yeah, it's pretty good. Pretty good. I got invited to a press screening of the Stooges documentary "Gimme Danger" over at the East Street Cinema last week, and I saw that. And Jim Jarmusch, great film director, great filmmaker. The Stooges basically created punk rock for all intents and purposes. You know, they influenced the Ramones, certainly, to a lesser degree. I would also say the Sex Pistols and the Damned. But that was maybe not the greatest documentary I ever saw. And I think I said as much, like, in a review afterwards. But, it just didn't do it for me, man. It was like, I can't even recommend it. I went with Zach because he wasn't working, and he works in D.C., and he was just like, oh, I'm free. And it just, like, I can't even recommend it to, like, new coming Stooges fans because it doesn't even, like, it's like they had a checklist, a timeline of all the big Stooges moments, and it just, like, they don't spend any time on it. They'll talk about, like, oh, the riff and I Want to Be Your Dog is really cool. Great. And they just like, oh, and then we met David Bowie, and he agreed to produce our third record, and then you don't see David Bowie or hear about David Bowie anymore.
So what's like? Is there like a?
It's the history of the Stooges.
But it's just like a really sterile, like textbook read.
Yeah, with the weirdest interstitials too. They're like, hey, look how, and get it? They're named after the Three Stooges. Let's show Three Stooges clips over like Iggy voiceovers as he talks about the history of the Stooges because it's funny, right? And it's like, no. It just didn't do it for me. I don't know. I like the Stooges as much as the next guy, maybe more than the next guy, but just if you want an education on the Stooges, just listen to Raw Power like twice.
They don't highlight really anything. They just kind of like just zip by everything.
They zip,
hey, by the way.
They zip, yeah. It's less than 2 hours and it feels over long though, because it's not even particularly interesting.
Bummer.
Show me more live clips of the Stooges. Show me Iggy rolling around in broken glass on stage. Show me Iggy whipping his penis. Maybe just the broken glass.
Hour-long clip of that.
Yeah.
Interesting.
A GIF. It's not even like a film.
Because I was
low quality. It's all pixelated.
I was semi-interested in possibly checking out when it was available to rent, but I don't know.
I'm sure it'll be one of those like Netflix documentaries, like in 2 years.
Because I love a good band documentary.
I love a good one.
Yeah. Although to be fair, I never really like got into the Stooges. To be fair, so
yeah, there's really out of the I guess 3 Stooges albums. I guess they put out some after they reformed in 2003.
Oh, the 3 Stooges albums.
Completely unintentional, I'm sure. Don't jarmouche this. The Raw Power is fantastic.
Well, yeah, I mean, Raw Power is that's the one.
Because it's produced by Bowie, who gives it kind of a more of a glam feel. Yeah, it's nice.
Can I admit how out of the loop I am? That I thought, when you started talking about this, I thought you literally meant that you saw a Three Stooges documentary, and I was like, "Oh, cool!" I don't keep a close enough look on your feed to see when you're talking about going to this documentary, and 2, I until you started talking about Iggy Pop, I forgot that there was a band called the Stooges, and I feel bad because I know you like them, but I never got into them.
At the time, a lot of people didn't either. They only put out 3 albums, but. I mean, they really are if you're a big fan of punk rock or you're interested in punk rock, listen to the Stooges. Certainly their last 2 albums, their first album is really more avant-garde than anything else. It's just like, it was anti-melodic for the sake of being anti-melodic, whereas Funhouse and Raw Power, especially Raw Power, are where it's at. But hey, there's better things out there. Yeah. I've spent some nights in my apartment now, and it's good. Nice.
Yeah. How is that? Other than not being haunted.
Yeah, no ghosts, no things that go bump in the night. No, it's really nice. It's nice. It's
so nice.
Nice. I've got all my furniture there now and everything.
That's nice.
So it's pretty cool. I just paid November's rent. That's always a hard check to write. Based on my experiences in apartments before, it's always like, oh God, But it's always a relief because it's like now I can live for like 30 days, but 30 days a night. But no, things have been good. Things have been. It was if you think about it, it was a fucking busy ass October.
Yeah.
Because within a week we were all in New York. Mm-hmm. I double what I do with Image. I've got, of course, my work intensifies towards the end of October, like with my day job, and I moved. Yeah.
Yeah, and there was an event every weekend at Mount Vernon.
Oh, I voted. I took advantage of Virginia's ability to do walk-in absentee voting and voted.
Nice.
Yeah, so did my civic duty.
You don't have to, there's also, if you guys are sick of the presidential election at home, remember there's other things on the ballot.
There is. My ballot was like full.
Yeah.
Because there's president, there's House of Reps, I believe.
Yeah.
And then there was like 4 or 5 referendums. And I don't know if that's Fairfax County specific. I think at least 2 of them were.
Yeah.
So maybe not specifically that same number for your ballot, but there's always other stuff on the ballot.
I still technically have the legal address in Fairfax just because I didn't want to fuck with my election stuff. I wanted to vote. Mm-hmm. And so I'm going to make sure I do that, and then I'll officially become an Arlington. I'll switch my legal residence to Arlington.
And I believe this is our last regular episode before Election Day, too. So
it absolutely
let's
is.
use
well,
that.
at least by the time it posts.
Yeah.
It was fun while it lasted, boys.
Let's use that opportunity to remind people that you probably should go out and vote.
Yeah.
November 8th.
I mean, I think they know by now, hopefully, because every celebrity's told them 7,000 times.
Yeah. But now it's 7,003.
Oh, Christ. No, 7,002. I don't need to tell shit.
Make sure you do your homework before you choose what you want, especially with those referendums. Those are worded very fucked up.
Yeah.
Much like that sentence that I just said.
But not in legalese.
Yeah.
Not steeped in legalese.
Yeah, no. Read it, because I'm a student of weird grammar, and even I can't make heads or tails of some of these every once in a while. And read what the shit's going to. Like, if it's one of those ones, it's like, hey, should we raise taxes for whatever? Read what those taxes are going to, because that's what's more important, not
and
like,
what's being taxed.
Exactly. Like, oh, man, I don't want to pay more taxes. Yeah, but it's going to help this. And, like, maybe you do want to pay taxes for that, because they're going to find a way to take your money anyway.
It's the kind of game we play, boys. Kind of game we play. Anyway, you guys got anything else?
No.
No, I'm good.
Sweet. Well,
Sweat.
hard. It's been another installment of Catching Up. Thanks again to Will Maxwell Prince for coming on the show, talking 1 week in the library and the electric shit. The IDW book that he does that I No. I've got the first book right here, because the Electric Sublime.
Yeah,
the Electric Sublime by IDW, 1 week in the library by Image Comics. 1 week in the library comes out December 7th, and in regular old bookstores on December 13th. Electric Sublime is available now, like we were saying, so definitely check that out, as is Judas, and I think you can get it on Comixology as well, so definitely check that out. Thanks again to Will, and yeah, this has been another installment of Catching Up. I'm Sam.
I'm Chris.
I'm Jake.
Fried chicken.
Thank you very much.
Good night, Eric Pana.
This has been another Geek Out production. If you enjoyed what you heard, hey, we've got a new commentary every Monday. We've got a special episode every Friday. Of course, there's the usual Catching Up show every Wednesday. And you get book club episodes just about every Tuesday these days. Thanks for listening.